Hey guys, what's going on? Laying back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about The Good Nurse. The Good Nurse is an American crime drama based on the true crime book of the same name, and tells the story of Amy Loughran, a workaholic nurse who struggles in keeping up with the demands of her job. After a rough night, she's informed of a newly hired nurse with lots of experience named Charles Cullen, who she eventually meets. The two strike up a close friendship as Charles helps Amy manage the stress of her job, but she begins to notice odd things happening at work soon after his arrival, culminating in the deaths of her patients. Suspecting that Charles may be responsible, Amy must navigate between her family responsibilities and red tape in order to uncover the truth so that the deaths will stop. I was surprised that this movie wasn't rated higher than it already is, because it's one of the most gripping thrillers I've had the pleasure of watching on Netflix. It is masterful in its execution of slow burn tension, creating a dreary, dark atmosphere backed up by an amazing protagonist, excellent film aesthetics, and a scathing commentary on the state of American healthcare. Jessica Chastain plays the lead role of Amy and is phenomenal in her performance. She gives it her all as a woman who tries to do the right thing by her patients, even if it means getting grilled by her superiors. She comes off right from the start as an honest and caring person who has others' best interests at heart, which made it easy to become attached to her. Aside from this, she has a number of personal problems that she has to deal with, between her gradually failing heart and her having to manage being a single mom to her two kids. This might seem exaggerated at first glance to have so many problems, but the filmmakers do an excellent job of balancing her subplots in conjunction with the main one, and how they all affect her. The movie gives ample time for the audience to see the sheer stress weighing down on Amy, from her heart being unable to take the toll of moving bedside patients to having arguments with her kids for being absent. With everything that Amy goes through in this movie, it's hard not to sympathize with her. Eddie Redmayne plays the other lead role of Charles Cullen, also known as Charlie in the movie, and is also fantastic in his role. He has a friendly disposition and is very unassuming in the role, in that one would never expect an average guy like him to be a killer. As the movie progresses, it becomes increasingly more evident that something is off about him, as the mystery behind his behavior starts to unravel. Even though I had some context behind the real-life Charles Cullen and his actions, I still had this lingering sense of doubt as to whether or not he actually was the killer, because he came across as just as nice of a person as Amy did. The movie really does a great job at creating this feeling of paranoia around Charlie, almost as if the audience is right there beside him, and then being just as surprised as Amy is when someone suddenly dies. Redmayne channels Charlie's darkness in such a way that it almost feels like it's not even there, which makes him terrifying as a cold-blooded nurse who hurts people instead of helping them. Amy and Charlie's relationship is the core foundation that supports everything about this movie. It's mutually respectful and even beneficial at first, with Charlie taking some of the slack off Amy at work, and Amy in turn allowing Charlie a chance to socialize with her kids after being unable to see his own. As things begin to take a turn, the relationship changes, but it doesn't play out in the way one might expect. Even though Amy detests Charlie's actions, she still has some form of respect for him for the things he's done to help her, and vice versa for him too, which goes to show how close relationships, even in the darkest of circumstances, are never completely black or white. And I do have to stress at this point that this really is an unapologetically dark and bleak movie. Patients suffer from terrible diseases and die horrible deaths, and their families have to deal with losing their loved ones at the hands of an unknown killer. Even people outside of the hospital have to contend with mounting bills, job difficulties, and other stresses of daily living. It seems as though every character in it goes through hard times and has some sort of baggage weighing them down, though it doesn't feel overblown so much as it's subtle and clever in the way that they're explored. And the little rays of hope that glimmer through character interactions add a real human element to their struggles that help me connect to them better on an emotional level. What makes this movie so compelling to watch is how nerve-wracking it is. There's a consistent tension that's present right from the beginning, and it slowly starts to boil the longer it goes on, which did a great job at keeping me invested to see what little thing would happen next and how it would escalate from there. The dark hallways and menagerie of medical items at the hospital serve to highlight both a sense of monotony with the jobs the nurses and staff work, and also a feeling of unease, and that this otherwise dull and unremarkable workplace becomes the perfect place for a killer to hide in plain sight. The soundtrack, composed by Biosphere, is amazing at how it captures the feeling of uncertainty and tension surrounding the murders in the hospital. Combined with the movie's use of long takes and close-up shots of characters stewing in their emotions, even a scene where characters are just sitting around doing nothing become oddly intriguing and even entrancing to watch. As suspense starts to build, it spills over and begins to affect other characters too, especially for the two detectives who look into the mysterious deaths. The frustrations that these men go through at trying to overcome the hospital's corporate stonewalling add further to the dreadful tone this movie conveys, as well as some levity to take a break from the story now and then. The longer one watches this movie, the more evident that its critique on the American healthcare system becomes. Between internal investigations being made to cover higher-ups' asses, nurses burning out and referring to their patients by numbers, and Amy racing to get health insurance just to be able to live, it all screams inefficiency and ambivalence, which would sound crazy if these things didn't already happen, and that's without getting into the murders. I know I already mentioned this, but it bears repeating that this movie can be incredibly depressing to watch at times, so I don't recommend watching it depending on what state of mind you're in. But with this being said, I also applaud the filmmakers for highlighting issues that existed 20 years ago and continue to exist today, which means that if these murders happened once back then, they can happen again now. And it's not like the movie is entirely doom and gloom either. The nurse-patient dynamic and mundane conversations they have are portrayed accurately and vary accordingly depending on the nurse involved. I like seeing how casual and laid back these scenes were and how they contrasted with the darkness around them. The only major issue this movie has, and honestly it's not that big of a deal, is how slow-paced it can be. Events proceed at a pretty sluggish pace, which on one hand can make things boring in some scenes, but on the other hand that's kind of the point, as the way the movie is structured is meant to highlight the inefficiency and bureaucracy of the hospital that weighs down on everyone. I also thought that the ending was a bit on the weaker side in comparison to everything else preceding it, as the movie becomes more predictable at that point regarding Charlie's outcome, but it's still fine. It wraps everything up on an emotionally satisfying note, so for as dark as this movie can be, it's great to see it finish everything in a brighter and more optimistic place. Overall, The Good Nurse is an intensely dark yet engaging crime drama whose slow burn style kept my eyes glued to the screen all the way to the end. If you like crime dramas that proceed at a much slower pace compared to others, and you can handle depressing topics and commentary, I highly recommend watching this. It's fantastic. Its palpable tension, great lead performances, absorbing cinematic style, and vicious commentary on healthcare wrap everything into a complete package of excellent thriller cinema. Although the events of this movie occurred decades ago, they remain just as relevant as ever, and I applaud the filmmakers for advocating for good nurses who fall through the cracks, as well as putting the spotlight on a monster and how the system enabled it. What did you think about this movie? Did you love it as much as I did, or were there some things about it you took issue with? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of The Good Nurse. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the German anti-war drama All Quiet on the Western Front. Bye bye!